Thank you all so much for coming out to this. I wanted to start just by doing a quick survey. Troy and I spoke and said it would be really interesting to just find out, first of all, what your existing relationship with humor is with relation to advertising. So if you could just do a quick hands up if you have used humor in a campaign before. Oh, okay. Oh, job done. Thanks for coming. Sorted. They're all ready. All right, but put your hand up now if you think that humor is not appropriate for all campaigns, only certain areas. There we go. We do have some minds to change. We can work with that. All right, well, let's start by trying to change your minds on that one. So, you've already been introduced to our panel, Bronwyn, Chiara, and Troy, and thank you very much for being here. So we want to talk about generally the use of humor in advertising, but specifically in areas where you might not consider it appropriate to use humor. We're going to explore whether actually you can do that with any topic, and then also a little bit about the how and the why. Okay, so the science of it, and we're hoping to change your minds by that. So why don't we start with you, Bronwyn?
Oh, no. Okay. No? No, we can. Let's do this.
Let's do this. So Bronwyn, I mean, you work in advertising, but you're also a fellow comedian.
I am, yes.
And you have worked on a number of campaigns in tricky areas, but areas where people might not think that humor should be involved. Do you want to start with? Oh, there go all my notes. We're off piste already.
Great start.
Thank you. How are bananas? I have no notes.
She does physical comedy too. It's great. No, I think I understand when clients come to me or to my team and say that they don't think humor is appropriate. But I think, not just as a comedian, but as someone who consumes advertising, we all know that humor is the most, or at least one of the most powerful emotions that we can draw on, whether it's to make a connection with our audience or to make a lasting impression. I think especially having done a lot of government work during the COVID years, I think we entered an era where people were looking for a bit of lightness in their ads. And as someone who grew up in the 90s, maybe a return. I'm not saying we want zany advertising for some brands, but I think humor doesn't always have to mean humor with a capital H. It doesn't have to be laugh out loud. Sometimes it's just about relating to your audience and keeping their attention. And that, honestly, in today's landscape is one of our biggest currency, right, is keeping people's attention. And we have found relating through a bit of laughter, a bit of humor is actually what keeps their attention more sometimes than trying to pull at their heartstrings or hitting them with the hard truths.
What sorts of areas do you, in your career, have you brought humor to, even lightly, that perhaps our audience wouldn't expect humor to have been involved in?
So I think the best example of this would have to be a funeral care brand that we worked on. So it's one of the biggest funeral care providers in the UK. And initially, we did some work with them where we thought, obviously, death is a very sensitive topic and everyone's experience with it is very different. And we tried to approach our TV advertising from that space. And the ads were effective, but they weren't really, I don't think they were talking to a new audience. And with some research, we found out that death talk on TikTok is one of the most popular searches. There's a lot of chat, a lot of the younger generations who want to overcome their fear of discussing death. And it allowed us to think, okay, well, maybe social is a space where we can have a bit more fun, if you will. I know, putting the fun in funeral care, right? Don't worry, I did try to make that caption work once, but the client was not so on board as you guys are. But what was really interesting was we ended up growing their TikTok account into like thousands of followers, because what we ended up doing was just going, you have access to this, like funeral care directors are the most amazing people you'll ever meet. They're your personality. They're your people. They're the face that you're going to talk to when the unthinkable happens. So let's use them. So as opposed to creating stories inspired by, funerals that they've run, why don't we get to know the funeral care directors and put a face to the person you're going to be talking to, one of the hardest things in your life. And actually, that is what resonated more with people. And it was so exciting just to learn what happens behind the doors of a funeral care home, but also humanizing the people that deal with it, and then sharing the funny stories of ways you can personalize your own funeral just really added a lightness. So it's not like laugh out loud, but hearse tours did pretty well on TikTok.
I think that's a fascinating example, because just working purely in comedy, not in advertising, I don't know how many of you remember 6 Feet Under, the show, but we've managed to set comedy in a funeral type setting. So if you can set if you think about it from a sitcom perspective, could I make a sitcom out of this? Then why can't you find humor in that for advertising purposes? Because what is a sitcom but 30 minutes of advertising for that particular industry? But you said a really important word there, which starts with R, which is research, which is where I want to bring Chiara in, because you are our science guru on this panel when it comes to researching humor. And we had a great pre-chat before this panel about the importance of research, which I think what surprised me about our chat is how many people attempt humor in advertising without researching it. Because to me as a comedian, that's insane. Like, if you've gone to any show at the festival, you're going to find those of us like myself. I have my full title out there. I'm saying this is the show Rebellion. But up until I got here, every time I went on stage, it was called work in progress, because it takes hours and hours of knowing, of working things out to figure out what works. So it amazed me that that doesn't happen in advertising, is what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen as often as it should, really. To give a tiny bit of background on System 1 for anyone who's not familiar, what we do is we are a creative effectiveness agency. We test ads with real people to predict how they're going to perform in market. So obviously that's most effective when you pre-test an ad, or even an idea for an ad, a storyboard, a script, to see how it will do then when you launch it. And our method is unique because we capture the emotions that the ad elicits in people. So we know that we are way less rational as human beings as we like to think we are. So most decisions we make because of how we feel, not what we think. So when we test an ad, we will ask people how the ad makes them feel, right? And that is a core part of how well it's going to do then in market. And we also, for whenever someone tells us they're feeling happy, we ask them which type of happiness best represents how they feel. And one of them is amusement. And we've actually mapped our data with the IPA data, their data bank of case studies. And we found that amusement is the type of happiness that drives the most business effects. So the data is there, and there's plenty more. The IPA themselves, they have done research showing campaigns without humor, campaigns with humor, and they on average tend to perform better. But obviously it's about getting the tone right. It's about, figuring out whether it's laugh out loud or it's subtle and so on. And that is, how you said, all in testing it and doing the research to find out what the right fit might be for your brand.
That's really interesting. So just to clarify, as a take home, every ad that had amusement in it, i.e. used humor, performed better than a counterpart with no humor. So does that mean the take home is, why would you ever not use humor? Is that what I'm getting from this?
Basically, yes. I would say everything that is, as I said, there are so many different nuances of humor, right? There is something that's a bit more lighthearted, and that's something that's a bit more out there. I think what was really interesting, another piece of research we've ran a while back, is we retested a bunch of ads from the past during times of hardship. So during recessions, during the COVID pandemic, and we found that the more lighthearted ads did even better during those times, because people needed the essentially the entertainment, the light relief even more. So I would say, yes, it's pretty much a win if obviously you get the tone right and it does fit who you are as a brand.
Tone. I think we've heard that from both of you. Troy, do you want to come in and talk a little bit more about tone and types of humor across a range of products? Because it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, totally. No, I think, again, just to touch on that, the bit about why wouldn't you use humor is a good question. And I think that fits into what fits for you. If you're not using humor, what are you using is another question. Like, again, you can be quite emotional with it, or you could be kind of shock tactics. I think but those things aren't as powerful as humor. And I think with humor, all humor and all comedy is about making a point. And those points can be like, again, in your face, they could be slapstick, they could be surreal, or they can be really just like intelligent and wit. And I think the spectrum of comedy that you've got to use is like so wide. We're at a festival here where you've got 3,000 shows about comedy and not one of them is going to be the same. It shows you that's a huge...
Not all of them are going to be funny.
Well, it's a good... Well, it depends. It depends on what floats your boat. Some things... I think that's the thing. It goes back to finding something that fits for you and your brand, and you've got such a choice in terms of where you go with humour. I think that's where brands, I think they see it as one-dimensional when actually it's multifaceted. And I think that's where that journey when you create humour is quite daunting, because you go into it quite wild. When you go into it, you're trying to find, it's exploratory the way you start with humour, and to find that tone is not like when you just do normal kind of creative and ads. It's very much, we'll be wrong here, and that's okay. And your point about pre-testing is really interesting. So I think you're absolutely right. There's not a one-size-fits-all. There's lots of different humour for different things. But I think the most important thing is the reason we use humour is about making a point and making that point really resonate. I think there's loads of examples in the past. If you think of, again, great campaigns like Mac versus PC, which is an old-fashioned advertising campaign about basically convincing you that Macs are better than PCs. I mean, they were very dry facts that they were trying to get across. They made 66 commercials that were just getting every single product point, and the reason they got people to engage with it was with humour. And I think that's the thing. It's just a tool you can use to make your point, and that point can resonate more if you get the right kind of tone for your brand.
Well, let's start with a few examples and let's look at the breadth of it, because I think that's the other thing, is understanding what falls into the category of humor. I think we do immediately think, my product, it's not appropriate to do a tango-like ad. Like, that's just, that is, we can all agree that the tango ad uses humor. And then you'll go, but I'm a funeral care home, that is not appropriate for me. So can you give me just a few examples of where humor, outside of the narrow definition that we tend to start thinking at from laugh out loud funny, what other campaigns can you think of?
Yeah, I think it's off the top of my head, some really interesting ones for me are like, intelligent humour doesn't get used as much as it used to. So again, a classic example of that would be Economist. That would make you smile, but it wouldn't there was no gags there. There was no jokes within the posters. There was something that you'd look at, you would smile. There's an intelligence there. And I think that subtlety of humour, I think, is something that, again, doesn't get used. So I think there is brands that are good at it. I think less so. I think now it is slightly more one-dimensional in the type of humour, that is it a joke? Is it a tango ad? Is it slapstick funny? When actually what you'd be looking for is brands like again, Economist that use that wit and knowledge. And for me, humour is based on real context and insight. And that's where, once you understand your audience, you'll find out where the intelligence is, and you can play that really softly and people will still nod and smile and it will resonate. So
I think that's a great example, because that's an example where they understood who their audience was, and the bravery wasn't in using humor. The bravery was in only speaking to their audience and not trying to do a catch-all.
I think it's interesting though, like what now, like looking around at, obviously ads have to speak to a lot of people, and this may not be like haha funny, but I don't know. At least in England, there's energy companies are all battling, right? So there's a brand called Octopus Energy, and they've got this cute little octopus mascot. So again, not haha, but did I choose them because I was like, oh, cute? Yes, like that is how I chose my energy provider, and the app is really great, and you get to spin the wheel to see if you get any free gas at the end of the month. And I never get it, but I get a fun little fact. And I'm a grown woman. But the thing is that I thought was interesting, I was like, oh, they humanize something that's really boring and dry, right? It's something that I just need. I need to heat my flat and not blow all my money on heating my flat, which is freezing. And what I noticed is now British Gas have a cute little mascot too, in the shape of a furry little blue family that looks like something out of a Pixar movie. And I was like, that was a decision. And I know because Octopus Energy is kicking butt right now, right? So it's not laugh out loud, but I think what they're trying to do is make something that's very boring and very essential kind of like, like their family, that's a family just like my family, you know what I mean? And it's a cute little creature that I hope doesn't spawn like a bunch of merch like the Meerkats did, but I think we're living in a merch era.
I was just going to say, like, like the meerkat. This is something, a system one called Fluent device. So when you create so Fluent devices can be characters, like the meerkats, like the octopus, or they can be a scenario, like should have gone to Specsavers, or you're not you when you're hungry for Snickers. And so the idea is that by employing this Fluent device time and time again, you can build both an emotional connection with the audience, because we grow, well, especially when they're a character, we find them cute, or we want to follow their adventures. Like, we get hooked by the stories. But also they're very effective because they immediately cue the brand. So they're really a win-win because they make you memorable and emotional. So yeah, it's a good strategy. We were also talking about that when British Gas got them out. We're like, oh, they're on it. They're onto it. Yeah.
Am I misremembering? Who was Lecky then? Was that not British Gas? Do you remember Lecky? Am I the only one who remembers Lecky? Okay, well, that campaign didn't work. Fair enough. So humor, actually, it can go all the way from the laugh out loud funny all the way to the sentimental, really, because Christmas time, we're seeing a lot of sentimentality, some of which they go for humor, as we saw last year, some of which they're going for just all out family love vibes and that kind of thing. Cara, can you talk to me a little bit more about the testing process, which we touched upon, but you do quite a lot of testing in terms of finding that, and you were telling me how you don't just test at the beginning, which is what you recommend, is test from the beginning, test from the storyboard, but you're getting ads that are coming in after they haven't worked and testing. So talk me through that process a little bit more and some of the science of that.
Yeah, so we can do, so ideally, what we would recommend to any brand or agency is to start with pre-testing. So having, for example, a storyboard, animated storyboard, put that into testing, see, how the idea initially resonates with people, how it makes them feel, why it makes them feel a certain way. And one thing that's really cool with our method is that we can not only assess what emotion overall they felt about the ad, but also as the ad played out, obviously if it's a video ad, which emotions it evoked throughout. So you have an emotional journey, which is particularly important when you're testing an early stage ad, because you can be like, oh, this scene is not landing as well, we're not going to shoot it. We're not going to spend loads of money, when we are then on set to shoot this scene. We're going to focus on something else. And then what we can offer is recommend consultancy, essentially, and that is based on all the research, right, that we know is out there in the industry about what works in advertising and our own experience in the field, obviously. And then there can be different optimizations, right? So that the whole idea is you can avoid putting a lot of budget behind something that is not resonating or perhaps could be improved. And then obviously you could also test an ad after it's been live and use that to inform future creatives. But we're actually talking about this earlier, and this sentence came up which felt quite appropriate, which is like, it's much better to diagnose than to do a post-mortem. So it really depends on what stage the brand is in, but that's what we would do.
And I think, just to speak numbers to help convince you, if you're like, that sounds like a lot of money, how much money is being saved by doing all of this diagnosing as opposed to post-morteming?
Interesting. Well, I don't know exact figures, like on average how much is saved. I can only imagine what production budgets are behind an ad, and I know that one of our tests starts at like £2,000. So how is that compared to that?
Right. Yeah, you're right. So you're spending £2,000, for example, on a particular test, but what you have found, I remember you said that when you were doing post-testing, that you were finding how much money was being lost by ads that weren't funny. You found that was it beige ads? Gray ads? Puce ads? Ecru ads. It was a color. Eggshell?
Now we got it.
No, it wasn't eggshell.
It was doll. So we've done research called The Extraordinary Cost of Doll, which looked, sorry, you threw me, yes. Now I know. You were right. It's because we weren't necessarily saying, dull ads versus humorous ads, which is what threw me. I'm sorry, but it's precisely that, which is dull ads versus entertaining ads. And so just how much, essentially, when you have a dull ad, an ad that elicits a lot of neutrality and not much positive emotion or other, even negative emotions sometimes can be better than driving neutrality. When you have a dull ad, you need to put so much more money behind it for it to have an impact than you'd have to put behind an entertaining ad, because an entertaining ad that evokes emotion will do a lot of the legwork for you, essentially. So it's not just about, saving on production budget, is also about your media budget and saving on that.
So let's talk about actual industries that this can apply to. Troy, I know that humor is used a lot in FMCGs.
Yeah.
But where are we not seeing humor used?
Lots of places. If you look at any ads, there's a lot of crap out there. So I think it's a case of just trying to find.
Not your work.
Not your work. Everyone who makes work in here is beautiful and it's amazing. Obviously, I think what I'd say is if there's a sector not doing humorous stuff, there's a huge advantage there to just look into that area. So one example that comes to mind is like shaving, right? Dollar Shave Club came out of nowhere with a humorous ad in a sector that made no humor. Like, the best a man can get, really dull shit, man in a mirror, blah, blah, blah. And they did that for like 30, 40, 50 years. And then out of nowhere, Dollar Shave Club comes and launches. And I knew it was a new business model, but it also had to get in front of people. And it was kind of your point there of, with not a lot of spend, how do you make a bit of waves in that sector? And it completely transformed that sector. It went on, obviously, to be sold for £1 billion. So it's proof that this you can shake up even what you just think is a sector that never goes near humour. It can have a transformational effect. And I think that's how I always see it, is if no one's doing it in the area that you're in, you've got a huge advantage. And I think you see that as well. Currently, if the stuff I love at the moment is Curry's TikTok stuff. If anyone sees Curry's TikTok stuff, it's absolutely fantastic. They make selling a toaster, like the most dull thing you've ever seen in your life, really fun and enjoyable. Or again, there was a great one for an air fryer where there was this kind of classic clip of like a horse kicks a chicken, and then the chicken flies out of frame, and then you cut, and there's a guy with an air fryer ready to catch it. It's like stupid stuff like that. And suddenly, I've never seen an air fryer advertised like that. It's getting huge engagement, and then they obviously bolt on the harder facts to it. But I'm warm to them. I'm already interested, and I think they've looked at areas in that sector of selling toasters, white goods. It's pretty dull, pretty boring, and they've made huge strides. So I think there's not really a sector or an area that you can't use it. You've got to do it right. You've got to do it right with it in terms of tone, but it has a even more transformational effect if you're in an area that isn't humorous. So FMCG is renowned for making funny stuff. It's harder to make funny stuff when you expect it. When you don't expect humour, it punches much harder. And I think that's where I'd urge anyone that thinks it's the wrong brief, like we said at the start, why can't you use humour is the first way you should look, and convince yourself that you can't use it, then fair enough. But I think it's a good place to start because you can have that transformational effect.
I think that's a brilliant take home. I mean, in a nutshell, if you have a client or if you are a product where no one else is using humor in your area, then grab it, because you will make huge waves by being the first to do so, rather than, oh, it's not for us. I think that's a really big one.
Can I add to that? Because that actually is really interesting, because something I've noticed is exactly what you said about Gillette. So I think you have to look at like culturally what is happening, and there's themes to advertising. And I think Gillette, along with everything else, there was a time when it was all about trust. I trust in this product, I trust in this brand and what it can deliver. So whether it was a razor or a bank or real estate or insurance, it's coming from a place of like, we've got the experience. And then that shifted to, I think in the last, let's say, decade, it was all about relatability. And I think that's why you see so many ads now feature families, and they want to show, I mean, I think the joke I always make is like mixed race family, because it like ticks more boxes. As a mixed race person, I'm allowed to say that. But the joke is you see a lot of ads now, like, look at this family. Aren't they just like you? Look how they use this product. They're trying to relate to you. So relatability became like a very powerful tool in terms of using humor. You see a lot more ads that show lots of, it's like kind of snippet advertising. It's like, look at all these, way that Argos, look at all the products. We're in the park, we're doing this. And I think the shift is now going into, because TikTok has informed humor, this now Gen Z, even Gen Alpha, quick edits, fast, a bit surreal, a bit crazy, because they've got your attention for 2 seconds. So that's why you can kick a chicken in the air and catch it in an air fryer. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's going to be interesting to see how humor evolves and how other brands try to get involved on that cultural kind of train, if you will.
Just on that point, 'cause I think what's really interesting is, I think someone said it earlier, where humor used to be kind of kicked into, it's okay to do it in social channels. It's that as the other one you get all the time. It's like, we can't do it here, but we can definitely do it because we can just, it's Wild West. It's a playground, we can do it. I think what we'll find is that as socials become more mature, it becomes the lead medium. And then actually that gives brands now confidence, because Currys have kind of shifted the way they're even looking at their other advertising channels based on the success they've had. So it's like confidence is coming from being slightly more daring. I think what we'll find is that the stuff that used to be relegated to social will now become just the general wave because they see the success of it. So I think we'll see more of that. Big brands starting to think, oh, it's worth it in the long run.
I think part of that driving force is social media. The fact is, on social media, especially TikTok, you can opt to not watch the ad. And now brands are going, well, how do I keep you on my ad? Whereas with the, in 30, 40 years ago on television, we didn't have a choice. We just had to sit through it. And so that's where we could go, trust me and my razor. You must trust me. And that's what's also driving it. It's also what's driven, to my opinion, the shortness of the ad. Now you got to grab me in a second. It used to be 30 seconds on YouTube. That's huge now. 30 seconds. The amount that you could do in 30 seconds. Now it's like a second or I'm out. You're working on something's coming out. I don't want to give away what you can give away.
I know.
I'm dying to hear this story.
There's like so much I want to say, but I can't.